Alright troops, welcome to the wonderful world of Dante that we shall be exploring today, and I am your host, Zodiac. First of all, before we get started, I want to give a big shout out to the guy who plays for the IGN footage for not being completely terrible at the game. That was so unlikely, and we actually get a proper look at Dante's toolset because of that. Seriously, big ups. Was not expecting someone competent at all. The big confirmation is that style switching is back. After the initial Dante trailer release, there was a lot of worry going around because there wasn't a single clip in there that had moves from two different styles in succession. But the first gameplay demo release started off with it immediately, which was so relieving. For now, let's talk weapons. Rebellion is back, Dante's staple sword since Devil May Cry 2, and it's looking like the weapon we know and love. The moveset's very similar, with the same 3-hit combo and our standards high time and helm splitter. Everything shown so far was present in the previous games. Million stab, round trip, all your favourites. We're also treated to standard Swordmaster fare. Aerial Rave makes its return and we get a look at the full Dance Macabre in the IGN footage. Everything looks the exact same as 3 and 4, so there's not too much wisdom for me to impart here. Except man, Rebellion rules, just one of the most fun weapons there is in games. We have the reveal of our gauntlet weapon for Dante, Balrog, which I think I'm a little bit in love with right now. Its moveset is a big departure from the hand-to-hand weapons of the previous games and looks very nimble. Our previous fist weapons were all about dealing out slow, heavy hits. We have a lot of bobbing and weaving and rapid fire punch attacks with Balrog. Looks like a ton of invulnerability in the dodging, which should make for some very dynamic gameplay. When it's first equipped, there's no sign of fire until it's been charged up via punch moves, so it looks like it's going to operate on a charge and release cycle. Build up the fire, go ham with the heavy kicks, and then bust out Swordmaster for the capoeira moves. It was confirmed in a dev interview that the weapon is going to have separate punch and kick modes, although we don't know how they're toggled just yet. This type of cyclical gameplay is something I'm all about though, and is a great incentive to keep using a ton of different moves. What's more, the charge stays even if you switch to other weapons, and you can hear the weapon talking and counting down when it's about to time out, which is a seriously neat touch.
3, 2, 1.
Like Beowulf and Gilgamesh before it, it seems like a very ground heavy weapon, but it still has a ton of awesome new shit in the air that hopefully factors well in air combos, particularly in punch modes. I'm sure there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. The moveset seems absolutely enormous and a ton more varied than what we're used to, and it's going to need some exploring to truly understand. Definitely the weapon I'm most interested in so far. And of course, on top of all that, it's just plain cool. Cavalier is the name of Dante's bike weapon, and it looks like it hits hard. I didn't think I was going to have much to say about it at first, but right before I was about to start editing this video, another gameplay video dropped that showed the move pool was about 1,000 times larger than any of the initial footage showed. It has a good variety of combos both on the air and in the ground, although they all look pretty similar in function. Slow, heavy hits. It looks extremely fun to use, but how well it's going to function in more advanced combos is up in the air. The heavy hitters of previous games typically only had a few moves that were nimble enough to keep a juggle going, but there are a lot of attacks here that keep the enemy in the air without dropping them or launching them away. The movement abilities are the ones that interest me most. Launching an enemy and then driving after them to keep an air combo going sounds very, very fun. Ebony and Ivory are Ebony and Ivory. All the basics are in, although to some time the standard gunslinger shots have been changed to this quick firing triple shot thing. At first I thought there was no footage of charge shot, but you can see a tiny flicker of it from the end of this battle. No eyes on how the bullets look in action or what their properties are though. The one big thing is that Rainstorm now lets you move around while using it. This has some implications, but I'll talk about those more later. Coyote, Dante's shotgun, looks to have made the transition with all its tools intact and more. It has its usual knockback properties and damage fall off at range as you'd expect of a shotgun. All the gunslinger moves you know and love are back. Shotgun stinger, backslide and fireworks. Although there's no evidence of charge shot, but I assume it's in the game based on Ebony and Ivory having it. Overall, it looks like it handles similarly to previous games, but it has one new move, this slide that lets you chase enemies down without shooting them away. Being able to chase enemies down without blasting them is certainly a very useful tool, and it'll be interesting to see how it handles once we get our hands on it. Firing while in the air seems to conserve some of your momentum too, which it also did in 4, but looks more extreme here. It's a subject I'll be coming back to later, but it's important to note for now, so keep it in mind. If there was one thing I definitely didn't expect to be excited about, it would be a taunt. Dante's air taunt to be exact, which is a returning move from Devil May Cry 4, Ecstasy, Lucifer's Rose Toss. This was the move you used to detonate Lucifer's pins, but it had another bigger function in combos. It's one of Dante's best launchers, and it works just like that here. I really expected this to be gone unless we saw Lucifer again, but it is so nice having access to it, because even removed from its combo application, it just looks smooth as hell. I mean, look at it, it's awesome. Also, I love the idea that Dante just walks around with roses on him at all times in case he needs to look cool. It was always just for show in 4 anyway, and not a part of Lucifer, so it respects the canon, which is so important to Devil May Cry. Also, a quick aside on the subject of taunts, but it seems like Dante's taunt is quick and snappy like in 3. The long drawn out stuff from 4 is gone. Devil Trigger looks like it's had a few tweaks since 4, the most noticeable one being Flight, which was incredibly useful in certain situations in both Devil May Cry 1 and 3, so it's a nice tool to have back. It also has a small explosion when activated. Whether this is like Devil Trigger explosions in 3 that can be charged and unleashed to do damage isn't clear, but if I had to guess the answer would be no. Devil Trigger explosions in 3 were beyond broken and removed from 4 for what I think is a very good reason, even if I had fun with them. Devil Trigger Stinger looks a bit different. It appears to just hit instantly and in front of Dante. In 4, it hit multiple times and had a huge long hitbox that lagged behind Dante, allowing you to keep enemies launched and add horizontal movement to your combos, like in this clip here. Although, outside of stylish combos, it was maybe a little bit too good, so balance wise it seems a lot less overpowered, although it's sad losing that combo option. The biggest change though is that HP regen is insanely fast compared to previous games, and in an interview Itsuno claimed that it's been increased to compensate for the removal of vital stars, the healing items in the previous games in the series. This is a pretty wild change if you ask me, because it was easy enough to ignore using a consumable item that gave your ranking a big hit, but you can't really avoid Devil Trigger healing if you want to use the mechanic at all. Royal Guard seems to have had the biggest rework with 2 key changes. There's a block timing just shy of a perfect guard, where you guard an attack and still gain meter, but not as much, which I'm going to call a half guard for ease here. In 3 and 4, when you did a half guard, you'd take chip damage, which would count as a hit for your style gauge and end screen ranking, but it seems to me that in 5 you can get away with this without eating shit. This definitely makes things easier, but we have no way of knowing if harder enemies can maybe break this guard. Regardless of this, I can't entirely hate on the idea of making Royal Guard easier. A huge part of effective Royal Guard usage in the previous games was abusing the jumps and vulnerability frames to make the timing easier, even if you were really good and knew exactly what you were doing. It's also my favourite style by far, and making it more appealing to people who might be intimidated without reducing the skill cap on it should hopefully spread the joy of guarding to other people. Seriously, nothing feels better than a perfect parry. Biggest change though is this mini release, spending 1 bar of your Royal Guard meter at a time for a retaliation attack, which interestingly is a projectile. Whether this exists in conjunction with the usual Just release or not is anyone's guess, but it's a massive change to the style either way. It now has far more utility against weaker enemies, because you don't have to worry about spending this big bar you've been working up for a whole mission just to dispatch a weakling. And if the classic style release isn't in, it means you're going to have to engage with the style far more heavily to keep up consistent damage against big targets. No more saving it up just to unleash on a specific enemy with no intent of building it back up. The trickster moves we've seen are almost identical. Teleport is the exact same, trickster dashing while Devil Trigger is on is identical, but regular dashes have had the ending lag on them reduced a lot since 4, making it a lot less clumsy if you're not using Royal Guard or other moves to cancel it. Nice change. Now it's time to get a little esoteric and maybe a wee bit too in depth, because to get what I'm going to talk about here you're going to need a quick primer on a fairly fundamental Devil May Cry 4 mechanic. Inertia. It's pretty much what it sounds like, conservation of momentum and how it's applied to different moves Dante has. It's a huge staple of Devil May Cry 4's combat system, leading to a lot of cool ass techniques like Inertia Rainstorm amongst other more simple options to add movement and flow to your combo. It's one of the big physics quirks that separates 4 from the other games in the series, and there was never any clear indicator that it was intentional or more than a happy accident. At the more wild end of the spectrum is guard flying, although I think you can pretty clearly categorise that as a glitch, look at it. But it's an example of the wonderful world of inertia and the strange unforeseen options it can give you. You can't really confirm its application in 5, but there are a lot of hints in this video that it's going to be sticking around, although to what extent we can't know just yet. Dante seems to retain a lot of momentum after using trickster teleports and gunshots of all types, so there's at least some attempt to keep this type of movement flow in the game, and it will hopefully be applicable to a lot of things as we learn more about it. In 4, there were 2 specific moves you could use to generate a huge amount of inertia, but whether or not this type of transitory property is going to continue to exist in 5, or if it's a more generalised concept is up in the air. So far, the biggest concrete change related to it is that you're no longer going to need to abuse it to make Rainstorm actually hit things. Dante moves all over the place naturally. To contrast with 4, you can only really do this if you jump cancel out of a trickster dash or dive kick, otherwise you're stuck stationary. It's a little sad to me that this previously special technique that took some execution and practice is now just a standard move, but if you didn't use inertia it was basically trash and worthless, so I don't really see any other way this could have gone. God, this game's gameplay looks good though, guys. It looks so fucking good. And speaking of things that look good, thank God we're going back to a lady design closer to 3's. She's so fucking cool and I love her. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, I'll be keeping pumping out more content like this in the lead up to DMC 5, and hopefully even more after it's out, so hit that sub button if you're interested. Later trips.
Can a guy get a break? I just woke up from... Oh!